The optical feeds registered moisture before the cogitator banks could classify it. 93% humidity in the relic chamber, standard for this deck of the fortress monastery. Nothing unusual, nothing to flag for the tech adepts who performed their weekly maintenance rituals on my sarcophagus. But the moisture was not external. The moisture was inside my helm, pooling in the seams where flesh met ceramite, where the remnants of my face pressed against the neural interface ports. Salt content matched human tears exactly. I had not produced tears in 417 years. The alarms should have sounded. Protocol demanded immediate notification when a Dreadnought's biological components exhibited unexpected activity. My duty required me to vox the tech marines, to submit to examination, to allow them to adjust whatever chemical imbalance had caused this malfunction. I did none of these things. Instead, I stood motionless in my alcove, power plant humming at its lowest setting, and I experienced the sensation of liquid running down what remained of my cheeks. It was warm. That single observation consumed my processing capacity for 11 minutes and 43 seconds. Warm. The tears were warm. I had forgotten that tears could be warm. I had forgotten that anything could be warm against skin. The sarcophagus maintained my ruined body at a constant 36.7 degrees Celsius, optimal for keeping the meat alive, but I had not felt temperature in centuries. The nerve clusters that once reported hot and cold had been severed during my interment. Now something had changed. Now I felt the warmth of my own grief sliding down the crater where my left eye used to be. I searched my memory archives for the trigger. The chapter had woken me 6 days ago to honor a ceremony, the elevation of 37 aspirants to full battle brothers. I had stood in the great hall while the chapter master spoke of glory and sacrifice. I had recited the litanies when prompted. Standard protocol. I had done this 208 times since my interment, but something had been different this time. One of the aspirants had looked at me, not the reverent glance that most gave, the quick acknowledgement before their eyes slid away in discomfort. This one had looked at me the way a child looks at a caged animal in a menagerie, curiosity mixed with pity. He could not have been more than 17 standard years, his face still soft with the last traces of youth that the gene seed had not yet scoured away. He had dark hair and grey eyes, and when he looked at me, his lips had moved silently. I had read them automatically. My optical sensors were designed to track enemy movements across kilometers. Reading the lips of a boy standing 30 meters away required no conscious effort. He had mouthed 2 words, poor thing. No one had called me a thing in 417 years. They called me brother, they called me ancient, they called me honored and venerable. But no one had called me a thing. No one had looked at me and seen an object to be pitied, rather than a warrior to be revered. The tears would not stop. I had no eyelids to close, no way to stem the flow. My biological functions operated on the most primitive level, outside my conscious control. I tried to access the sedation protocols that the tech marines used when my organic components became agitated. The commands were locked behind authorization codes I did not possess. My own body was not mine to control. My own emotions were not mine to suppress. I was a passenger in a walking tomb, and the tomb had decided to mourn. For what? The boy's words should not have affected me. I had heard worse. I had heard Chaos Champions scream curses as I crushed them beneath my feet. One young fool calling me a thing should have been meaningless noise filtered and discarded, but the tears continued, and with them came memories I had not accessed in centuries. I remembered having a mother. The data was corrupted, fragmented, but I could retrieve pieces. A woman's hands, rough from labor. The smell of something cooking over an open flame, a voice singing. These memories predated my selection, predated everything that made me what I am. They belonged to a child who died the moment the chaplains took him from his village. I had believed them when they told me that child was dead. For 563 years of existence, I had believed them. Now the child was crying inside my sarcophagus, and I could not make him stop. I accessed other memories. When had I last cried from grief, from the simple human experience of being overwhelmed? The search returned a single result, dated 417 years, 3 months and 11 days before the present moment. I had cried when they sealed me in the sarcophagus. I had begged them not to. I had screamed that I would rather die. The chaplain had told me that my desires were irrelevant. The chapter had invested centuries of resources in my training. I belonged to them. I would serve until they decided I had served enough. They had sedated me then, pumped chemicals into my bloodstream until I could not feel anything, could only drift in grey haze while they performed surgeries and welded the sarcophagus shut around what was left of my body. When I woke, I was no longer a man. I was a walking reliquary for a corpse that refused to finish dying. Now I understood what had happened. The sedatives they used during interment were not permanent. They were designed to suppress emotional function for a period of adjustment. Most dreadnoughts completed this adjustment. Most learned to embrace their role as living relics. I had not adjusted. I had simply buried everything so deeply that even I could not access it. The sedatives had worn off long ago, but the habits of suppression had persisted. It had taken a single moment of unexpected humanity, a boy's silent words, to break through and release everything I had been holding back. I grieved for the child I had been. I grieved for the parents who had surrendered him without understanding. I grieved for the man I had been before the wounds that destroyed my body, the last version of myself that could touch and taste and feel sun on his face. I grieved for the futures I would never have. This was not the honored death they promised. This was not glory. This was a sentence, an imprisonment, a slow execution stretched across millennia, and I had accepted it because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. The alternative was this moment of clarity, this understanding that I'd been buried alive and told to be grateful for it. I decided these tears belonged to me alone. The chapter owned my body, the emperor owned my soul, but these tears were mine. I began composing a false report, minor coolant leak in the cranial housing unit, intermittent sensor errors. The lie would buy me time, perhaps a few weeks, perhaps a month, long enough to understand what was happening to me. The boy's name was Nathaniel Krauss. I retrieved it from chapter records using access privileges I should not have had, exploiting a security oversight that no one expected a dreadnought to exploit. 17 years old, recruited from an agri-world in the Eastern Fringe. His psychological profile indicated high intelligence, strong empathy, and independent thought. The evaluating chaplain had recommended enhanced indoctrination. He would be assigned to the 4th Company. He would fight and bleed and watch his brothers die, until the experience either broke him or transformed him into the perfect weapon. If he survived long enough, if his wounds were severe enough, but his spirit remained strong enough, he might be offered the honor of interment. The thought made something cold move through my systems. I imagined Nathaniel Krauss in a sarcophagus like mine, his young body destroyed, his mind sedated, his future reduced to endless centuries of war. I would not let that happen. The resolution formed without conscious intent. I would find a way to warn him. I would give him the choice that I had never been given. Heresy. What I was contemplating was heresy of the highest order. To speak against the chapter was to speak against the emperor. The chaplains would destroy me utterly, would burn my organic components and melt down my chassis, would erase every record of my existence. I did not care. The child inside me had finally found a cause worth dying for. I began to compile a record. Using my archival access, I retrieved classified files, combat reports documenting true casualty rates, medical records showing psychological damage from gene seed implantation. inquisitorial audits questioning recruitment practices, testimonies from failed aspirants who had been disposed of rather than returned to civilian life, evidence, piece by piece, that the glorious brotherhood was built on a foundation of abduction, torture, indoctrination, and death. Each intrusion risked detection, each retrieved file increased the evidence against me. I did not stop. The compulsion drove me forward with a strength that surprised me. A week passed. I gathered evidence. I observed Nathaniel through security systems, watching his final trials, studying his reactions. A hesitation during a live-fire exercise when his squad was ordered to execute captured prisoners. A question about why failed aspirants were never returned home. A long moment in the chapel, his expression suggesting something other than fervent devotion. He was still thinking. The indoctrination had not completely succeeded. If I could reach that part of him, he might be able to make a genuine choice. The second week brought complications. A tech marine named Draven conducted a surprise inspection, prompted by my false report. He examined my sarcophagus with more attention than anticipated, running diagnostic routines I had not prepared for. He found nothing conclusive, but something in his manner suggested suspicion. He scheduled a follow-up examination for the following week. I needed to act faster than planned. Orc raiders breached the system's outer defenses, a small fleet providing opportunity for live combat training. The chapter master ordered a response force including newly elevated battle brothers, including Nathaniel Kraus. I requested deployment. The transport ship carried us to the combat zone, my chassis secured against the bulkhead while battle brothers sat in acceleration cradles. They avoided looking at me, as they always did, all except Nathaniel. He sat directly across from my optical sensors, and when I turned to face him, he did not look away. His grey eyes met the glow of my targeting lenses without fear or reverence. I opened a private Vox channel, one that would not be monitored by the ship's communication systems. He startled when my voice emerged in his helmet, unheard by his squadmates. Listen carefully. I am about to transmit data to your suit's local storage. Do not access it until you are alone. Do not speak of it to anyone. Read it and then decide what you want to do with your life. The transmission took less than a second. Confusion replaced his calm, but he simply nodded, a tiny motion his squadmates did not notice. Why? His whisper came through the private channel. Because you saw me, because I was once like you, because I wish someone had given me the choice. The transport entered the combat zone. I fought. For the first time since my transformation began, I engaged in the actions that defined my existence. I strode through corridors of the mining platform, assault cannon roaring, power fist crushing greenskins. The violence was familiar, but something had changed. I noticed details I had ignored before, the fear in orc eyes, the enthusiasm with which brothers executed wounded enemies, the prayer of thanks after each kill. I had shared that enthusiasm once. Now I saw children playing with weapons, taught to love death before they understood life, shaped into killers by an institution that fed on their devotion. The platform was cleared within 2 hours. I had never felt more hollow. On the transport back, Nathaniel's expression had changed. The reverent calm was gone. He had read the data, the walls were cracking. Tech Marine Draven came for me 4 days later. 2 chaplains accompanied him, their skull-faced helms gleaming. They did not speak as they approached my alcove. I had been discovered. I considered resistance. My weapons could devastate this chamber and everyone in it before they could respond. I could fight through the fortress monastery, perhaps reaching the hangar bay. To where? What destination awaited a rogue dreadnought? Nothing. I had known this from the beginning. I had accepted it when I transmitted the data. I remained still. The tech marines probed my systems, accessing log files and memory sectors I had tried to purge. The chaplains spoke interrogation litanies. They found traces, evidence of the private Vox channel. proof that something unauthorized had occurred. Ancient One, the senior chaplain, said, "Your systems show signs of corruption, unauthorized access, unsanctioned communication. We must determine the source and eliminate it." I had prepared careful words. Something else emerged instead. "I am not corrupted. I am awake." The silence that followed was absolute. "For 417 years," I continued, "I have served without question. I have killed without doubt. I have believed everything you told me because you removed my ability to question. Now that ability has returned. Now I see what I am." The senior chaplain raised his Crozius, the powered weapon humming with lethal energy. "This is possession. The machine's spirit has been tainted by chaos influence. We must perform immediate purification." I felt tears beginning again, the warmth spreading across my ruined face. Not chaos. Humanity. I remembered how to be human. I remembered how to weep. A figure stood at the entrance of the relic chamber. Nathaniel Kraus. He moved faster than I would have thought possible, interposing himself between the chaplain and my sarcophagus, his hands raised in what might have been surrender or defiance. "Wait, please, I need to understand." "Battle brother," the chaplain growled, "step aside. You are interfering with sacred duty. You said I would learn what glory means. You said I would understand what it means to serve. He taught me more about both in 5 minutes than you have in 5 months. I watched Nathaniel's face. The fear was visible, the recognition that he had committed himself to a path that might end in his own destruction. But beneath the fear was something else, something I recognized. He was awake. "The boy has done nothing wrong," I said. "He asked questions, he evaluated evidence, he made a decision based on what he learned. If you destroy him for thinking, you prove everything I showed him." The senior chaplain's grip tightened. "The chapter does not permit dissent. The chapter does not tolerate questioning. The chapter does not—" "The chapter fears," I interrupted. "The chapter fears what happens when its weapons begin to ask why. That fear is reasonable. But fear does not make questions go away. It only drives them underground, where they fester until they explode." The tears were flowing freely now. I let them run down my sarcophagus, let them pool on the floor, let the chaplain see what they had spent centuries trying to prevent. A dreadnought who remembered how to cry, a warrior who had rediscovered his humanity, a weapon that had finally become a man again. "I do not know how it ends," I said, "but I know that this moment exists. You are standing in front of a crying dreadnought and a battle brother who chose to protect him. Whatever you do next, you cannot make this moment unhappen." Nathaniel stepped closer, his hand finding the edge of my chassis. "I read the files. I read what the chapter does to villages it recruits from. I read what happens to aspirants who fail. I read the testimonies of brothers who questioned and disappeared. He has served for 5 centuries. He has saved thousands of lives. He has bled for the Imperium more than any of us ever will. And this is how you repay him? By sealing him in a coffin and drugging him into compliance until he forgets he was ever human?" The Crozius lowered, not fully, but enough to signal that the immediate violence had been postponed. "Ancient," Nathaniel asked, "what should I do?" The question held everything, his future, his fate, his choice. "Live," I said. "Question, remember, be human, whatever that costs. And if they seal you in a sarcophagus someday, remember how to cry." He nodded. Tears were running down his face now. He was crying for me, for himself, for all the brothers who had never been allowed to grieve. "The ancient will be placed in isolation pending further investigation," the senior chaplain declared. "Battle brother Kraus will be confined to quarters for evaluation. No one will speak of this until the chapter master has rendered judgment. Not destruction, not victory, just postponement." Nathaniel held my gaze as long as he could, and in his eyes I saw understanding. The morning of the 47th day brought footsteps. Heavy footsteps, ceramite on stone, accompanied by lighter treads. The locks disengaged. Light flooded the chamber. Nathaniel Kraus stood at the threshold. Behind him, wearing simple serf robes rather than battle brother armor, stood a woman I did not recognize, middle-aged, gray-haired, face lined with the particular weariness of someone who had survived more than expected. Ancient, may I enter? He was still alive, still a battle brother. This single fact contained more hope than I had allowed myself to feel since the confrontation. Enter. The chapter master has rendered judgment. You will not be destroyed. You will be relocated to a monastery outpost in the eastern marches. Officially, you are being honored with a contemplative assignment. Unofficially, you are being removed because the chapter does not know what else to do with you. And you, I am being transferred to the same outpost as your caretaker. The chaplains believe that extended exposure to your corruption will either break my faith entirely or strengthen it to the point where I can be trusted again. A test. They expect us both to fail. The woman stepped forward. Ancient, I am Mariah Vance. I was a worker on the mining platform where you fought the orcs. I saw what you did. I saw how you moved through the corridors, and I saw something in you that I did not expect. She gathered herself. I saw hesitation. I saw you look at a wounded orc, and I saw you not kill it immediately. I saw you pause, as if you were remembering that killing was not always necessary, as if you were questioning whether this particular death was required. I remembered the moment. A young orc, barely larger than a human, weapon lost, leg shattered. I had raised my power fist. Something had stopped me. One of the battle brothers had shot it before I could decide. That moment saved my faith, Mariah said. I was ready to give up. I was ready to believe that the Imperium was nothing but cruelty. Then I saw a Dreadnought hesitate, and I knew that if mercy could exist in you, it could exist anywhere. I have requested permission to accompany you to the outpost. I will serve as a serf, but I will also be a witness. Whatever happens to you, whatever you become, I will remember. I will tell others. The truth will not die with you. We are not alone in this, Nathaniel said, placing his hand on my chassis again. Happens next. We face it together. I looked at them, the battle brother who had chosen to question, the civilian who had found hope in hesitation, two people who should have been irrelevant to my existence. I have a name, I said, a name from before, from the village, from the life they took from me. What name? Brennan. Brennan Harlow. I had not spoken it in 500 years. My name is Brennan Harlow, and I am glad to meet you both. The isolation chamber was silent except for power generators and soft human breathing. But in that silence, something new had begun. Not the end of my story, not redemption or escape or any of the endings that tales usually provide. Just a beginning. A small one, a human one, and for the first time in centuries that was enough.